All right, thank you for joining me at today's web event, The 3 Steps to Your eDiscovery Paralegal Career. My name is Ann Pearson. I'll be the presenter for today's webinar. We've got a lot of information to cover in 1 hour, so I'll be moving through it pretty quickly. For those of you who have attended Paralegal Boot Camp sessions before, you know that I try to get as much information as possible out to you as quickly as possible. So we've got several hundred people registered for today's webinar. If I don't get to your question while we're on the call, the webinar, you can feel free to call me or email me after the event, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. So while we get started, what I want to do first is ask you to send me a chat message, probably through your Q&A line, and give me an idea why you're joining the webinar today. I put a few of these options up here that you might want to choose from. Either you're looking for your firm to change your title to an eDiscovery paralegal, or maybe you're looking for other opportunities, or you just wanted some resume advice or some LinkedIn advice, all of the above, or maybe none of the above. You just like spending your lunch hour watching webinars while you're eating your sandwich. So go ahead and do that, because I like to be able to test out the Q&A lines and also to get an idea, where we'll spend more time, which sections we'll spend more time on today, because I like to customize this for what your responses are. And while you all do that, I'll take a minute to pull up on the screen the contact information, how you can reach me after today. Feel free to go on LinkedIn and request, do a connection request with me, and we'll talk about why some of those connection requests are important when we talk about the section in LinkedIn. So we don't have a moderator for today's webinar. I'll introduce myself. Again, I'm Ann Pearson, and I'm the founder and director of training here at the Paralegal Boot Camp. The Paralegal Boot Camp provides skill-based workshops to paralegals through its online learning system, our live workshops that are in various cities, and in-house for law firms and corporate legal departments. I started the Paralegal Boot Camp back in 2010 after leaving what I fondly refer to as big law. I was a paralegal manager at an AmLaw 100 firm for many years, where I managed anywhere between 30 and 40 paralegals in 3 different offices. Prior to that, I was a senior litigation paralegal at Holland & Knight, and I had started my career back in the early 90s for a small boutique firm in Sarasota, Florida. And I truly enjoyed my paralegal career. The role of eDiscovery paralegal wasn't available to me back in the late 90s and early 2000 before I moved into management. And I have to be honest, if it was, I probably would have taken it and not moved into management. Seeing this new role is exciting because it gives litigation paralegals a specialty area to focus on and grow as technology grows. It's also exciting to me because from what I've seen so far, this new title and role is also allowing for increased compensation because not everybody can call themselves an eDiscovery paralegal. So what I'd like to talk about first, though, is just some general career advice. If you take one thing away from today's webinar, it should be this. If you wait for your law firm to advance your career, you could be waiting for a long time. Your law firm or your company that you work for, they're not in the business of career advancement. If you work for a law firm, they're in the business of providing legal services to the client. That's their primary focus. If you work as an in-house paralegal at a corporation, whatever that corporation sells to the public is what they're in the business of doing. That's their primary focus. It's not to say they don't care at all about you, but whether or not you're happy at your career with them is way down at the bottom of their list of priorities. But the good news is that this is your career. You have the ability to take it as far as you want if you just don't wait for your law firm to do it for you. What is an eDiscovery paralegal? Well, some firms don't even have it defined yet. They advertise it in positions and recruiters post it, and a lot of them can't really tell you exactly what it means. So this is my definition of an eDiscovery paralegal when I've looked at all of the job advertisements that are out there and talked to recruiters and and some office administrators. And essentially it's a litigation paralegal, but with a focus on using project management skills and technology skills to master case management of litigation matters that involve ESI. Even as recently as 5 years ago, if you were a litigation paralegal who handled a lot of eDiscovery, your only option was to move into either management, if you wanted to advance, or into litigation support. Doing so meant that you were most likely going to have to give up the case management side of your job and focus more on the technology side. Most litigation support people don't get to go to trial or manage a case throughout the life of a case. They're only involved in the litigation support tasks, and then they move on to the next project. In other words, they're kind of working at arm's length and not really being involved in that day-to-day case management. That's another thing that really excites me about this role too, is that as an eDiscovery paralegal, it combines the case management with your technology and eDiscovery skills. So you're not going to have to give up the case management side that you might really love. So today we're going to go through a three-step plan, sorry. I wanted to, obviously there are many other steps that you could take to advance your career to an eDiscovery paralegal, but obviously only having an hour, I had to stick with 3 steps, and that is who you are on paper. So we're going to talk about your resume, who you are online with your LinkedIn profile, and then who you know. Talking about networking being the key to advance. But first, let me mention that this webinar is not necessarily about how to switch employers and get a new job, although you will be able to if that's what your goal is. But like a lot of you who have sent in that message about what your purpose of attending today, a lot of you might just be looking at how can I approach my employer. I'm happy where I'm at, I have good benefits, and I really want to stay here, but I want that eDiscovery role or title. So that's what all of these things will also be helpful to you when you're looking at that, and we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. So if we looked back, even just as short time ago as 1999, and compared the changes that we saw between 1999 and 2009. On the left-hand side, this was a typical document production. Not every case was electronic. In fact, unless it was one of the bet the company cases, it was probably all done in paper. I remember back in the, I think it was mid-90s, close to the late 90s, being the only paralegal in our firm who was involved in a case that had electronic documents. And that case, not to date myself, but that case was managed in a DOS-based database called DocuFind. I don't know if any of you on today's call had experience using that, but it was an old Arthur Andersen technology. And that was literally, I think that case ended up going to trial in 1999. So fast forward 10 years, and now we have technology-assisted review tools, apps that allow us to conduct document reviews from any mobile device, and more than we have time to cover in an hour. Essentially, the technology changes just in that 10-year period. So then I'd ask you to ask yourself, what's it going to look like then in 2019, which is only 4 years away? So are you going to be doing things now to ensure that you're staying on top of that technology curve? And do you know where that curve is headed? Because if you look back to where our litigation cases were and how they were managed 10 years ago, you might even remember how extremely expensive it was, which is why not all cases were put into any type of database. Back in the day, even 10 years ago, vendors were charging $2,500, $3,000 a gig to process and host our electronic discovery. Paralegals and associates were doing linear reviews of hundreds of thousands of documents, billing the client $150 to $300 per hour. And a lot of those we had staffed with anywhere between 5, 10, or 20 people at the firm were working on it at the same time. So the demand goes up, the prices go down. Now there's technology that we have available that's going to reduce the size of those document reviews. It's going to reduce the people working on it because now the clients want us to hire contract lawyers at $35 an hour. Vendors are charging a fraction of what they used to, and that leads me to the advice that I heard at a seminar recently, and it was from a recruiter, and it was, you know, the way to give your career some insurance if you're a litigation paralegal is to make sure that as these technology changes are rapidly changing how you do work, is to work to make sure that you're not becoming the button pusher. If a majority of your time is spent sitting at a computer doing a linear document review and selecting responsive, non-responsive, privileged, then you'll want to reset the direction of your career so that it's not focused on things that technology is eventually going to eliminate. Clients would much rather pay contract reviewers $35 an hour on some negotiated national contract and then have you, the eDiscovery paralegal, managing them and managing the project and only spending a few hours a day doing that. That's why this is also, to me, the timing is perfect that this new role is coming about, and that's why. It's because firms are also recognizing that clients want more of a project manager than just a button pusher. So that's what today's webinar is about, giving you a strategy to advance into that eDiscovery role and then how to get started on implementing it. So let's start with step one, your resume, and that is who you are on paper. Because everyone has very specific experience and skill sets, you know, you can't customize a resume writing webinar for everyone. What this is about is how your resume can become your tool to either advance or find another job. And what I'd like to propose is that first you start on the opposite side. Rather than starting with your resume, start with a job search. Go on the internet and search for some of the types of positions, because not every firm is going to call it an eDiscovery paralegal. Sometimes it's an eDiscovery project manager, it's an ESI manager. I actually went out and found some of these jobs that were listed, and the job descriptions were the same as an eDiscovery paralegal, with just a little bit different levels of project management requirement. So why start with a job search to start your own resume? Because that's exactly what the hiring managers and recruiters are looking for. The skills that you find listed in those job searches are going to be what they have outlined in their advertisement, so that when you apply for a job, they literally go through and mark off, you know, either check mark or have software that allows them to figure out if you have the skills that they need. Have you met the minimum qualifications to even be able to come in for an interview? So I did a few searches yesterday and uploaded a screenshot of what I came up with. And I just used the keyword eDiscovery. And I came up with a couple of different job advertisements. This one, even though it's not titled an eDiscovery paralegal, it's clear that the role that they're looking to fill with this job is an eDiscovery paralegal, especially because it's in the title, and then it's also asking for or saying that they're looking for someone who will be relied upon as a subject matter expert in eDiscovery document review platforms. When you look at the responsibilities and qualifications they're looking for here, it's clearly eDiscovery focused, both in the responsibilities and then also down below in the qualifications. So this particular job, you can see it's in the U.S., Virginia, Richmond. I did just get a couple of questions on where this is, where I found this job, which is interesting. You can see there that it's with McGuire Woods. They've got the website there, but this job search was done on Indeed.com. And again, I just used the keyword eDiscovery. I don't think I included the word paralegal in there. Anyway, so this is the first one that I came up with. And then the next one that I came up with was an eDiscovery project manager. Again, the same types of things that they're looking for, except this one has a lot more focus on the skill set of project management experience and/or skills. So you may ask, you're probably already doing these types of project management things already, even if they don't call you an eDiscovery project manager. As a paralegal, you're doing a lot of these types of things throughout your eDiscovery projects. So what I do is, or what I recommend is, you do a search and get at least 3, maybe 5 job advertisements, and don't limit it to your specific geographic region. Do it on a nationwide basis so that you've got a good amount to pull from. And then you take those 3 to 5 job searches and literally cut and paste them into a Word document to combine your job search results and say, combined, this is about what all of them are looking for in terms of required skills and experience, and then desired skills and experience. And I just got some more questions about the handouts. All of this will be available. I'll email out the handout, the the PowerPoint slides for you to be able to have as reference after today's session is over. So we're starting with this because we want to go through it and see what we already have in terms of experience and education, and then what we need to be able to get in order to advance into that eDiscovery role, and essentially turn it into a to-do list. I've got these 5 things, I need to get these 5 things. So I'm a checklist kind of person. I admit that I may even have a problem overdoing it with checklists sometimes. I'll put together a daily to-do list the night before so that I can plan out my next day, and then if I do something the next day that wasn't on the list, I'll add it to the list just so that I can have more check marks on the list that I completed things. I know, I definitely have a checklist kind of problem. So we're going to take this list of required skills and experience and then the desired ones and turn it into that to-do list. Here's where I want to be in 2 years, 1 year, 5 years. What exactly are those organizations asking for when they want to hire an eDiscovery paralegal? And then what do you already have? So based on that combined job search result that we did, we can look at it and say, what's going to be our best return on investment to really prioritize, because you can't essentially go out and get every single required skill and experience, but you can definitely increase your odds by having more of them. So you go through your list and ask yourself, okay, bachelor's degree, got it, can check that off the list. 7 years of experience as a litigation paralegal, got it, check it off the list. Don't have 3 years of experience with ESI, maybe we only have 1 year of experience, but we do have experience using technology-assisted review or computer-assisted review. And I would tell you in that aspect, because the job advertisement didn't specify how many years of experience in the tar-car area, if you've worked on a couple of projects where you've had exposure to that software, you can consider yourself that you have that experience. Unless they said 3+ years of experience in using tar and car products, then you can check it off. And so then when we're looking at this list, we see that, well, we don't have experience with relativity. They're looking for, most of them are looking for project management skills. So would we look at getting the PMP or CAPM designation? And those are through the Project Management Institute. They are hard courses. I took the CAPM course, and it's about 35 hours or more, and the test is very hard. It's very focused on budgeting and scheduling and using the type of software that you would use as a project manager, not just an eDiscovery project manager. So when we see that we have these 4 things left, we have to look and say, what's going to be my best return on investment? Because I can't go out and do all of these things. I can't go get relativity certified because it's going to cost too much money. That's where we start with this list. And then before we move on to step 2, though, where we start with the return on investment, one thing I want to talk about is budget, because if you go back and look at this list, you know, the project management course, I don't know about the PMP, but the CAPM, that could easily cost you maybe $700–800. And relativity certification is even more. If you don't have the certification through ACEDS, I think that can be anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000. But there are other courses out there that you can take as well. But when you're looking at the cost, I have to tell you that when I first started the Paralegal Boot Camp, I would occasionally get emails from paralegals saying, your workshops look great, but my firm doesn't pay for continuing ed. And yet those same firms, when I would market those courses to attorneys and saying to the attorneys, here's a course for your paralegals if you want to give them the tools to succeed at trial or eDiscovery or time entry, whatever it was. And then the attorneys take that email and forward it on to the administrator or office manager, and they say, we should send Sheila to this. And all of a sudden, a firm that supposedly, at least the paralegal thought, didn't pay for continuing education, they're sending her to one of my paralegal boot camps. Another instance was when a paralegal in the Atlanta office of a big international firm had said my eDiscovery paralegal boot camp looked great and she wished she could take it, but her firm didn't pay for continuing ed. Well, when I searched my learning management system, I found that that same firm had already put 2 paralegals from their Miami office through the course. And then there was another time where I had a paralegal who paid for the boot camp herself out of her own pocket. She took the course, and as she's taking it, she's downloading resources, she's incorporating what she's learning into her current caseload, she's mentioning how she's taking this online course, and then when she finishes it, she shows the attorney the standard operating procedures manual that she drafted throughout the course, and her firm now uses it on their eDiscovery cases. That firm, she ended up calling me just a couple of months ago and said that her firm reimbursed her for what she'd paid for the course. So all of that is to say that some of these things on your to-do list for increasing that skill set and increasing your what your resume looks like may very well be paid by your firm, particularly if you're wanting to advance your skill set for your current firm. So keep that in mind, that even though there might not be an official policy or an official continuing education budget, they still might be very happy to help you increase your skill set, particularly if it's project management and eDiscovery related. So keep that in mind. So let's move on to step 2 in our program, who you are online, your LinkedIn profile. So I'll start by saying there are hundreds and hundreds of general LinkedIn webinars that will teach you the basics of setting up a profile and getting the most out of LinkedIn. You can attend those for general information. This part of our program, though, is focused more on the specifics of LinkedIn for your career advancement into an eDiscovery role. And what it is typically is, first we have to look at some numbers, because a lot of times paralegals will say to me, I don't like social media, I don't want to put myself out there, and I have to say, even though this sounds a little harsh, if you're wanting to advance into an eDiscovery paralegal position, whether it's a new position, particularly if it's a new position, but even at your firm, you have to be on LinkedIn. And here's why. Some of these numbers, I went out and did some research. There are 347 million users on LinkedIn. 2 people are being added every second. And 73% of all 18 to 34-year-olds found their last job through this, social network, through a social network, could be Facebook or LinkedIn. And then more particularly, the recruiters and hiring managers are all using LinkedIn to find candidates. So you really have to have a LinkedIn profile, but you have to have a LinkedIn profile that they can find. That's what's most important. And again, back to that resume where they're looking at the resume and they're checking off, does he or she have project management skills? Check. Certification in relativity? Check. Just like that, and just like they're uploading your resume into their database to be able to search for your resume for keywords, they're doing the same thing with LinkedIn. So it's all about filtering and keyword searching, at least when it's being used by hiring managers and recruiters. So you probably have the basic free LinkedIn membership, or maybe the premium upgrade that's $9.95 a month. Well, recruiters and hiring managers have the recruiting version of it that they pay about $100 a month for per user. And in that version, I can tell you that they get access to a lot more search capabilities. They can run searches that say, you know, find me a LinkedIn profile that has these keywords in the profile, where they live in this state or this metropolitan area. They have a college degree. You know, they can essentially use all of those filters to narrow down exactly who they're looking for and be able to reach out to you. Knowing that, you want to strategically place keywords in your LinkedIn profile to increase the likelihood that your profile is going to come up in their search results. When they're looking for an eDiscovery project manager or an eDiscovery paralegal, they're going to be putting in some keywords in there. Particularly when they've got a client who's saying, we want someone who has experience using relativity. You know, they're for sure going to have that as one of their keywords. So I would caution you, though, not to overuse the word eDiscovery just to have a bunch of hits like people did for a while to get higher Google search results. All that does is make it to where your profile comes up in a search result, but you never really get anyone reaching out to you, because once they actually read your profile, then they realize that you're not really qualified for the position. But a few things to start with. First, I would caution, before you go making any major changes to your LinkedIn profile, you go into your account settings in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and then this screen will come up. And this will allow you to be able to change your privacy settings. And these two are in particularly most important, because it turns off those activity broadcasts and your activity feed. So as you're making changes to your profile, your current employer isn't constantly seeing those changes and updates. And then also, for those of you who are not using LinkedIn at all, but who are going to go out today and have a LinkedIn profile, if you're worried about your current employer seeing, you know, you connecting to recruiters or any of that kind of thing, you'll see down below, a couple of lines below, you can select who can see your connections. So you can either make your connections to where only you can see them, or everybody can see them. But I would suggest, you know, if you are looking to make a career move to another employer, that you turn that on so that you're the only one who can see your connections. So I would like to go through a few basics of LinkedIn to get the most out of it in terms of your eDiscovery paralegal career change. And that is, so obviously this is a screenshot of my profile. And first and foremost, you must have a photo. You know, if you're just an avatar, that scary shadowy figure, some people think it's a fake profile set up by spammers. I have a rule of thumb that when I get an invite from someone who doesn't have a picture, if it's just an avatar, even if I recognize the name, I usually don't accept the connection request, just because I just never know if it's a fake profile that someone else, you know, hacked into this person's email or whatever. So make sure you've got a professional photo up there. And then the second one is most important, because the headliner that you have is different than your current job title. LinkedIn allows you to have a headliner. And initially, by default, it will pop up and populate whatever your current job title is. But you want to go in and change that, because this is a great place to start with keywords for that eDiscovery paralegal position. Because, again, this is not your job title. It's just your headliner. And your headliner is a way to say, this is what I do. One of the questions that just came in was, how would you recommend that for a litigation paralegal wanting to advance into an eDiscovery paralegal? I would say, you know, you could have litigation paralegal, focused on eDiscovery project management, or, you know, litigation paralegal specializing in eDiscovery. essentially something that reads like this is what I do, not this is what my job title is. Thanks for that. That was a great question. And then third, you want to customize your URL, which a lot of people don't realize that you can do. And that is just clicking on that link when you're in the edit profile mode. You know, I was lucky enough to customize mine many years ago, so I can just have my name there as Ann Pearson. So maybe you need to add a middle initial in or a number or something after your name, but try to at least have your full first and last name in there for a customized URL. It just makes it a lot easier when you're connecting with people. You know, you could have it at the bottom of your email signature line. That's what I have in mine, telling people, you know, connect with me on LinkedIn. Because back to these keywords that we're wanting people to find us, the more connections you have, the more real connections, the higher likelihood people will be able to find you. If you're a second or third connection to a lot of these people who are hiring managers or recruiters, then you're going to have more activity on your profile and it's going to come in higher on their search results. So, and then this first summary also is not your job description at your current job. This is another area where you want to focus on your keywords to get you noticed and to essentially introduce yourself and summarize all of your skills in one place, sort of like a bio. But this is where you're going to want to have those words in there. You know, if you're doing eDiscovery project management and you know, recently got certified as a project manager, or you work in a particular practice area, you know, like commercial litigation, antitrust, you want to have all of those words in your summary section. And then comes your job descriptions or your job listings. And those, again, don't have to be exactly like what your firm has you. You know, in respect to a paralegal, your firm might have a tiering system where your real title at the firm is Paralegal 2. But nobody knows what a Paralegal 2 is. If you're a Paralegal 2 in terms of the title at your firm, but you work in the litigation practice area, you would just simply have a title Litigation Paralegal rather than that Paralegal 2, because again, that's going to get the word litigation higher up on your keyword terms. Same thing with the summaries below. You know, these don't have to be cut and pasted from your job description that the firm gave you, because a lot of times, I know back when I was a paralegal manager, our firm was pretty strict about having job descriptions that were general, and a litigation paralegal's job description included things like traveling to the court and filing pleadings. But that was just because that was a job description that nobody wanted to get rid of and everyone kept it. You wouldn't necessarily want something like that on your LinkedIn profile if it's something that you barely ever do. So try to get real specific, and again, it's another place in addition to the title to get those keywords in your descriptions. Okay, I'm going to pause for just a minute to see if we have questions that we want to cover before we get on to the third section, which is the networking, which is key to advancing your career. So I'll pause and give everyone a minute to go ahead, send in your questions that relate to the resume section or LinkedIn. So one question, very good question, Jane, is, excuse me, I have a frog in my throat, is what about endorsements? I I think it's a personal preference. To me, every recruiter that I know, and I have, I want to say at least 50 recruiters that I talk to on a regular basis, some who I'm very good friends with, but they will tell me that they never look at endorsements. And my personal preference is not to focus so much on endorsements because, well, a good example is my new son-in-law. So my daughter's recently married, and my new son-in-law endorsed me on LinkedIn. Now he, works in advertising sales and has never once worked for a law firm or even set foot in a law firm's door and doesn't know what I did for a living, but he endorsed me for legal research, I think it was. And I've had other people who will endorse me for things, and I think to myself, I've never met them, I don't know them. A lot of the endorsements are valid and good, but because you also get so many of the others, I wouldn't focus on endorsements if I were you. That was a great question, Jane. Thank you. Another question, can you repeat the name of the organization? Karen, which organization is it? I'm assuming you're not talking about the Paralegal Boot Camp. The organization for project management is the Project Management Institute, PMI. And then another question, what is ESI? I know we're pretty heavy with acronyms today. So ESI is electronically stored information. Then another question, what if you're new in the field, just obtained certification, therefore have no real experience? How do you stand out resume-wise? Good question, Devonda. Part of the, I guess I would ask first what certification you obtained. Was it your paralegal certificate, or did you get some type of eDiscovery certification? Because I would caution you, if you're brand new to the field, if you're a new paralegal and you're not currently working in litigation where you have the potential to get exposure to eDiscovery, then I would caution you not to put yourself out there as an eDiscovery paralegal, because you really have to get that experience. Anybody who is looking for an eDiscovery paralegal is going to demand that you've got those years of experience. So I would say if you're a new paralegal, try to make sure that you can get into a firm where you're going to get some exposure to eDiscovery early on in your career. Usually, I mean, just about any law firm is dealing in eDiscovery these days, with the exception of maybe plaintiffs' personal injury firms. They don't have a lot of eDiscovery. I hope that helped, Devonda, and please feel free to email me afterwards if you want some more advice on that. I got a question, what is the C in C assisted review? That's computer assisted review. Good question, Nicole. And then another one, when searching for a new job or career, do you suggest a functional or chronological resume? Always chronological. I'll tell you that the recruiters will tell me that when they get functional resumes, it's already put them on alert or throws a red flag up to say they're probably trying to hide a gap in employment there. What they want to see is with each successive position you have advanced your skill set. So even if you have a gap, you're better to address the gap but put it in, chronological order, so they can see your first job as a paralegal, you were doing these basic types of skills. Your next job, you were advancing, you were doing higher level skills. Make sure that you're not blocking and copying all your bullet points from one job to the next, because they really want to see that advancing skill set. Those are some great questions, everyone. Well, so I think I got most of those questions answered. I'll go back through in just a couple of minutes to check. We'll take another break. But let's move on to this next section, which is all about networking. And really it is all about who you know. That's the phrase. That's really what matters. And so, you know, right now, the reason I've got this on here in particular is because there are eDiscovery vendors who are paying big salaries for experienced litigation paralegals to come work for them as project managers. And so, I know back in the day when I was a paralegal, I was, working 8 to 10 or 12-hour days, and the last thing I had time to do was attend some vendor networking event. And of course I had all of these excuses, I don't have time for a sales pitch, I don't need any of the services they offer, I already have my favorite vendor, I'm not the decision maker, I just don't feel like socializing at the end of the day. All of those were my excuses as well. Although usually the wine or beer that they were offering usually helped to get me there. All of them these are valid objections, and you probably have 5 or 10 others. But I wanted to relate a story to you that back in the day I would make time. I would go to networking events. I would make time to talk to vendors, particularly because they're the ones who are they are seeing eDiscovery from a bigger picture than you are in your firm. So you see it from whatever you have access to and however your firm is accustomed to handling it, where they see it from 30 or 40 different firms. They also have some pretty good free webinars usually where you can get demos of products. If you don't have any experience in using Relativity, they can get you a demo of Relativity. They can upload, a lot of them will let you upload a test case to it just to try out the software, and that allows you to at least know, when someone's talking about a particular type of software, you can at least know what they're talking about. But also because back in the day, I guess I was in a law firm type of environment for about 17 years. Yeah, 17 years before I started my business. And when I initially started my business, I put on a live conference in Atlanta, and I went out and sought money from vendors to sponsor the event and raised about $20,000 or $30,000 in sponsor fees. And I can guarantee you that they would have laughed me out the door when I went in to ask for that if I'd never once made the time to get to know them, where they knew my skill set, they knew me as a person. And I'm not suggesting that you do that based on the fact that 15 years from now you might open up a business and need a vendor to cut you a check for sponsorship. But what I'm saying is, they're the ones, even if they don't have jobs now, they may have jobs in the future. And in Atlanta, several of the eDiscovery vendors were looking for what they called eDiscovery project managers. And they specifically wanted to hire a litigation paralegal so that it was someone who had the institutional knowledge from within a law firm environment that they could bring to the vendor so they could better manage eDiscovery projects. And they were paying $80,000 to $90,000 for that position. And so where I see it heading, what's kind of exciting is that those positions, those vendors, have bigger pocketbooks a lot of times than the law firms in terms of their personnel budget. And so if they continue at that pace, and that's going to increase paralegal salaries, they're going to have paralegals leaving law firms to go to the vendor environment, have more flexibility, flex time, maybe some occasional work from home time, higher salaries. Eventually the law firms are going to need to start paying their paralegals more money in order to prevent them from leaving to go to the vendor. So that's why the networking part is important, not just from the vendor's perspective, doing it in person, but also this could be, this picture, let me take the words off the screen so you can see this person again. By the way, in my happy world, the woman is the paralegal and the guy is the attorney. That's the paralegal in the corner window office. That's my world anyways. But the reason I've got this picture on here is because this could be a vendor that she's greeting, or it could be an attorney in her office that's maybe on a different team that she's getting to know. She's networking, she's attending firm functions, she's participating in community type events that the firm hosts to be able to get to know other attorneys and other teams that might have those bigger eDiscovery projects. That's why networking is so important. And then we could go to the next one, which is networking online. Back to LinkedIn. Because of LinkedIn and Google Plus and Facebook, we have the potential to meet and interact with so many more people now than we ever did. But I meet so many paralegals who either, one, they don't have the LinkedIn account, or two, if they do, they barely ever log in. I'll post things occasionally, like I had the free access to that eDiscovery overview course that a lot of you probably received an email on after you registered for this webinar. So it's a 60-minute great introductory type of course that Erica Santiago teaches, and gives a lot of information for a primer for eDiscovery if you've never been exposed to it. And I posted it on LinkedIn, and because I have to pay for every user that goes in and uses the system, I limited access to 30 days. And I would get emails from people, from paralegals on LinkedIn 6 months after I posted it saying, oh my gosh, I missed this, I wish I could have taken this course. And they didn't see it because they only log in every once in a while. And when you do that, you miss some of those news feeds that are important. So keep that in mind. And then another thing is, I heard this from a career coach that I went and saw speak at it wasn't a legal type of event, it was just a small business owner event here in Atlanta, and she did a presentation on LinkedIn that was fabulous. And what she said is, remember, LinkedIn is not a private country club. It's meant to connect people and to connect you with people that you might not otherwise meet. If you treat each connection request on LinkedIn like you want to keep all your stuff private, kind of like you do on Facebook, then you're going to miss out on a lot, because there are just dozens of groups. And again, back to that, how do they find you? You've got to be able to have various connections that they're connected to by a second or third type of connection. One way to do that is through the groups. And so I put together a list of some groups, both on LinkedIn and then just some general eDiscovery groups that you may already know about, but they have some good information on their websites, and a lot of them will allow you to sign in and get a free newsletter. You don't have to join as members. You want to be careful about having way too many memberships that you're not getting the benefit from, but all of these places will send you newsletters with updates when the rules are changing related to eDiscovery, new technology that's out there. You just need to decide which one is which, or which one you'd like to join. And I know we're back to a bunch of acronyms, so luckily the Sedona conference is not an acronym, but edrm.net is the eDiscovery reference model, and ACEDS is the Association of Certified eDiscovery Specialists, and ESI Roundtable is obviously electronically stored information, but she puts a unique kind of spin on it and does live workshops throughout the United States. And then here's four, I didn't want to list every single eDiscovery group, because you could do a search on LinkedIn for eDiscovery and come up with these and more groups, but I wanted to give you at least 5 to start with, because if you join these 5 groups, then what's going to happen is, as you're logging into LinkedIn, you're going to start seeing group suggestions come up for you. So if you at least join a few of them and then get those other suggestions, you'll be able to keep current on the information where that's going. Because remember, with those changes that took place in that 10-year period, you want to be able to move away from being the button pusher. And then for those of you who want to choose the route of convincing your employer to give you that eDiscovery paralegal title, I wanted to give you just a few tips in closing that might help you do that. First, one thing I learned while I was a paralegal manager, trying to convince attorneys that they would be or should be using paralegals for more substantive work, I would talk to them about a paralegal's education and their skill set, essentially selling them on everything a paralegal could do for them. And what I learned was attorneys don't listen to sales pitches most of the time. They just want to see action. They want their problem solved. So my suggestion to you would be to start functioning in an eDiscovery paralegal role. Start taking on all of those things listed in those job advertisements and job descriptions. Once you're already doing the job, it's going to be a lot easier to prove to them that you're ready for that new title. And that's why it's important for you to go through that first step of your resume, even if you're not going to go out and switch employers. If you go through that first step where you do a job search and you figure out what kind of skills you're going to need on your resume, then you can use that as your checklist to be able to know, here's what I want to start doing in my current position, because eventually I'm going to go to management or my attorney and say, I've been functioning like an eDiscovery paralegal and I'd like that title. And then one last thing that I wanted to throw in, and I'm sure some of you have attended my SMART goal setting webinar, but keep in mind as you're going through this whole process with LinkedIn and coming up with those new skills that you might need to be adding, is always keep your goal SMART, which is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And so you just ask yourself with each new goal that you add, is it specific? Can I measure the outcome? Is it attainable? Not easy. Attainable isn't necessarily easy. It's, is it attainable? Meaning, if you want to go into an eDiscovery paralegal role, but you've just graduated with your paralegal certificate, that might be too big of a jump initially. Maybe your first goal needs to be, I want to go to work for a law firm that has eDiscovery cases. And then, of course, relevant and time-bound. So I'm going to pause for just a minute. I've got up here on the screen an April 9th web discount promo code for anybody who's attending today who wants to be able to take the eDiscovery Paralegal Boot Camp. Essentially, it's an online course that you take at your own pace, you visit as often as you want, and it really is primarily focused on project management skills. It's not about teaching you technology or certifying you in a technology. It's all about how to incorporate project management skills into each of the phases of an eDiscovery project. So I'm going to pause for just a moment to pull up your questions and see what kind of questions we have out there. Go ahead and send them in as you're thinking of them, and I'll keep scrolling down the screen and answering them.